When I lost my husband due to an unexpected accident, my world was shattered. But what made it even worse were the things that I did not know. I should have prepared for, and I didn't know. Today, I want to share with you what happened to me, what happened to my family, because I did not know and was not prepared. Friends, I don't want that to happen to you. So please stay tuned for today's episode. My name is Lisa. Welcome to my front porch, friends. Today I want to share a very heartbreaking story that I walked through because I was unprepared. Things I didn't know as a young mother that needed to be done. And I don't want that to happen to you. This is my channel. I am my beloveds too. I made a video about this subject in April, and it went viral as soon as I released it because it's a very important topic that many of us need to know about. But sadly, the first week of September, my channel was hacked and taken over. I've lost all my videos. This video is so important that I came back to redo this video. And I hope, friends, that when you see this, that you will share this, you will like it, you will comment on this, because that is the only way that YouTube knows that this is a topic that other people want to hear about. And it is a topic that every person needs to know. The things we don't know, the things that we do not prepare for, can absolutely devastate us and wipe us out financially. Friends, my husband owned a trucking company. He was an owner-operator, and he moved people across the United States. He was 52, I was 39. He had a son that I was raising. He was my stepson, and I had two daughters that he was raising as his own. Sadly, because of his lack of preparation and my lack of making sure things were done, we lost our home. We lost so much. It's bad enough to go through grief of losing the love of your life, your best friend, your soulmate. But when everything else crumbles around you, that makes it even worse. It took me years to get through this, years to go through the grief. I don't want you to go through that. So I'm asking you to share this video. I'm asking you to get your notebook out and take notes. I'm going to share with you some very important things that you need to make sure that you do so that you are aware and you won't go through the devastation that I had to go through. My husband died on March the 15th, 2008. So this has been a few years ago, but I want you to know that it took me years to walk through this valley of grief. Get your notebooks out. What I want to share with you is what happened on March the 15th. He was an over-the-road driver for United Van Lines. He had left on a Wednesday earlier that week. And I really had thought about going with him because, I was a stay-at-home mom. I homeschooled, but I also ran an entertainment business. On the weekends, I would do birthday parties, entertain, face paint, balloon twists, puppet shows, magic shows. I brought smiles and joy to all the families that I entertained, and I loved my job. I almost went with him, but I had a big event that was coming up that weekend. I was doing a grand opening for a brand new gas station that had just opened up, so I was doing face painting and balloons, and I had done their arches and stuff like that was going to be inside for the grand opening. So I chose not to go because I needed to stay home. He left on Wednesday. And when he had left, we had such an emotional goodbye that day or that evening. He left around, I want to say 7:30, 8 o'clock. Maybe a little bit later, I can't remember. And, I drove him up to his truck and dropped him off. I came back home. I was working on something. I was planning and trying to build a website for my entertainment business. He was gone for about 15 minutes and he called and he had left something at home, or he couldn't find something. So I drove back up there to get him, brought him back home, and he searched and searched, and I guess he found what he was looking for. So I drove him back to the truck, dropped him off, and he hugged me, and he hugged me, and he hugged me, and he kissed me, and he hugged me, and we just held on to each other for quite a bit. And I remember telling him, wow, dear, it's like you're never going to see me again. Friends, I had no idea that truer words would never be said again, because I never saw my husband again. I spoke to him again. That was Wednesday. He died on Saturday. But I never got the hug or kiss him again. And that was such a beautiful moment. And I'm so glad for it. On that day, I had spoke to him several times. That was on a Saturday. And it's marked in my mind like a big stamp because of the trauma that I had to go through and the trauma that I went through. It is something you're not likely to ever forget. I remember about 6 weeks before my husband had passed away that I had had a strange dream. Kind of like a premonition that something wasn't right. I'd had 2 premonitions, maybe 3 or 4, but I'm only going to talk about the one. I had dreamed that he was sick and that he was sick and he wasn't able to work, and I was going to have to stand up and take over the finances of the house. Now, I was a stay-at-home mom with our children, homeschooled. I did have my entertainment business that I did on weekends. But for the most part, I was able to be home and educate our children. My husband was a hard worker. We had a good life. He had a good business. Did we have ups and downs within our business? Sure, we had ups and downs within our business. But his business enabled me to be able to stay home and do what I wanted to do, was to be a mother and a wife and raise our children and take care of a home. And I was so grateful for that. And still yet able to do what I enjoyed doing, which was entertaining and bringing joy to the children and to the families that I entertained on the weekend through face painting and balloons and puppets and magic. So I had a great life. I truly did. But when I got that knock on the door at 9:30 on, March the 15th, everything changed. 9:30 at night. What I realized I was not prepared for. The officer came in and asked if this was where Mr. Riopel lived. And I said yes, and that I was his wife. And he let me know that earlier that day that my husband was on a scuba diving trip and that he drowned and that he had passed. My world went in a tailspin, like a hurricane was over my mind and my house. I don't remember a lot for those days leading up to my husband's funeral. But what I do remember, devastatingly, is that I needed a way to pay for my husband's funeral. Being a wife with children and a home and a business, I didn't have those answers. And I wasn't sure what to do. I remember calling my two sisters, and they were on a plane the next morning. And they came to help me because I lived 900 miles away from my family. And where I was at in Florida, I really didn't have very many friends. I was involved in a church, but really didn't have a lot of friends within that church. You know, I was raising my kids and being a good wife, and so I wasn't raised here. Excuse the vehicle and the noise. So I was not raised here. So I didn't have that support system. But somehow I think I must have made a few phone calls, and people from my church were there to help me that I didn't even realize that would come to my aid, and thank God for that they did. But my sisters came in, and I remember earlier I had had a dream that my husband was going to be ill, and that I needed, and I thought that it was going to be an illness. I had no idea that my husband was going to die. So I had made preparations to have somebody come in and to talk to us about health insurance. My husband was out on the road driving, as he mostly did. And I talked to the agent, and he was going through the different health plans. And he asked me some questions about life insurance. And I realized that I didn't know if my husband had life insurance, and so I wasn't sure about those things. My agent let me know that yes, I needed health insurance, but there was a huge gap that I needed to take care of, which was life insurance. And that if I didn't take care of that and prepare for that I was causing my family to be at risk. But because I was so focused in on the dream that I had, that something was going to happen to my husband and he was going to be sick, I failed to do what I needed to do with the life insurance. And I actually failed on the health insurance because I didn't sign, and I could have signed. I could have done that. I could have taken that out, and I didn't. And I could have taken out life insurance on my husband at that time, and I would have been prepared, but I wasn't. So what happened was we didn't have life insurance. My husband did tell me, though, that he showed me there was a place in a cabinet that if anything would ever happen to him, that all the paperwork was going to be in there that I needed. And he said that, that he was worth more dead than he was alive, and that there was stuff inside there that I would need to know. Friends, I'm telling you, you need to know. Don't let your spouse do this without inspecting and looking over the plans. I took my husband's word because guess what? He didn't know either. And what he thought was life insurance was actually an accident plan. And he took it out with the bank because the bank had mailed him some documents, and said that because, that he had his bank account with the company, with a bank, that he was actually entitled to a large, life insurance. Accident insurance is not life insurance. Had my husband have died of any other situation than scuba diving, I would have got nothing. He thought that he had real life insurance, but he didn't. What he had, and he also thought that he had insurance through the scuba diving company, but what he had was he thought he had $1 million worth of life insurance through the scuba diving Dan Corporation, but it wasn't. He had $15,000. And then the rest of this big giant policy was in case he survived and he was going to be hospitalized. It would cover those things. Again, The devil is in the details of what you do not know, because I never questioned him on those things. I didn't know the details of our business. I didn't know the details of our home, because I was living in a wonderful world where my husband took care of our finances and he loved me and he adored me. But I didn't know, nor did he. My husband loved and adored me, but he didn't know either, because we never took the time to sit down with somebody and open up and read our plans. Don't let this happen to you, friends. I was planning a funeral and found out that I couldn't pay for that funeral. Can you imagine how devastating that is? Because at the moment, that was all I was worried about, was trying to plan a funeral and pay for that. Let's handle that first. I'm sitting with my family at a funeral home, and I planned everything. I gave them the Dan scuba diving certificate that the scuba divers that my husband was involved with, they managed to dig up and help me get that information. So I handed that to the funeral home. Now I leave the funeral home and I'm going to the church to talk to my pastor. And I get a phone call from the funeral home that says, Miss Riepel, this is an insurance policy, but we can't take it. We can't take it. I didn't know what I was going to do. Thank God for friends that I didn't really know I had, but thank God my husband had friends. Friends within his community. And those scuba divers, I made the phone call to the one that was helping me because he loved my husband and he stood beside me and my children to help us walk through this. He put his money on the line. And he paid for my husband's funeral because he knew that as soon as everything went through that I would give him the money back. And I did. But I want you to know, ladies, gentlemen who are watching this, that if we are not fully prepared and we don't discuss these things with our spouse, something unexpected could come. And the life of your wife and your children will be completely altered for years to come. They may lose their home, lose their cars, lose their sanity. Please don't let this happen. The accident policy that my husband had, because it was an accident and because my husband was in the water, they had to investigate all of this. They had to prove that it was not intentional. That took 6 months to get. There was $100,000. And the scuba diving policy was separate. That was $15,000. Took 6 months for that money to become available to me. So please be aware of what kind of policy you have. And make sure that your wife, that your husband, that your children, your adult children know where these plans are. Because you can have all the insurance, $1 million policy, or what you think is $1 million policy. But if you don't share that and give copies of that to your beneficiaries who are going to be responsible, the insurance company is not going to contact them because they don't know your loved one has passed. You have to contact them. Your money will be lost and your family will not receive it. That was just one thing that I had to endure. The other things that I had to endure was his business, was our home. My name was not on that home, was not on the deed because he owned the home before we got married. So my name was not on the deed. We were just getting ready to, when he was to return on Monday. Tuesday, he was going in and we were going to refinance. We were going to refinance because we were in, during 2008, when the market crashed, we were in a plan, a mortgage that was an adjustable arm because we had a lower rate. But he was going to refinance that. And we were going to go into a fixed rate. My husband never made it home. So here I was caught in that. I didn't know where the paperwork was, where the documents were. We had a safe, a big giant safe, a heavy safe that was in our garage. Guess what? I did not have the combination for the safe. Luckily, through prayer, God showed me where that combination was to that safe. So I was able to get in there and I was able to get documents, but half of what was in the safe, did I know what it was? No, because I was living in a world where my husband was making the decisions and I was tending to the children, and I didn't know. If it hadn't have been for a sweet, precious lady at our bank, a couple of weeks or a month or so before my husband passed away, my name wouldn't have even got on that bank account. Because my husband, he was over the road all the time, and, he would leave me with, checks would come in. And I would, take them to the bank, because I had the routing number and the deposit slips. And, a lot of times the lady at the bank, she knew us by face. She knew we were husband and wife. And one day when I was in there, she said, "Miss Riepel, I'm taking this, but I'm going to put this and I'm going to deposit this. But the next time your husband comes in town, you have to bring him in. Because we have to get your name on this bank account, and we need that on there." She said, "Just bring him in immediately." So thank God for that lady, because when my husband did come in, maybe 6 weeks before this, I picked him up and we went straight to the bank and we put my name on that bank account. Thank God for that. Because if that lady hadn't have done that and pressed that issue, my name wouldn't have been on that bank. What little money we had in there, I wouldn't have been able to get access to. Yes, we had a good business, but we were going through hard times at that time. So, because it was 2008, his truck had been down for 6 weeks before that. So, we needed every dime. And because of the having to wait 6 months to even get a hold of any type of life insurance, that if he hadn't have died of an accident, I would have been penniless. Penniless. And I know my husband didn't intend that. So there are so many things that you need to know about. A trust, a will. Make sure your name is on bank accounts. Make sure that even my head is still spinning. The utilities weren't in my name. They were in his name. They didn't even have my name on there. Utilities. All of those things. Wives, husbands, please do your family a favor. Have a will, but a will doesn't cover everything. Have a trust. A trust is very much more secure than a will. Make sure your name is on your bank accounts. Make sure that you have life insurance and that everybody knows. You need also to have a beneficiary, and you need a second beneficiary and a third beneficiary in case your mom and your dad, a husband and wife, die in an accident. God forbid they pass at the same time. You need backup beneficiaries. And those beneficiaries need to know where those policies are. I lost my car, I lost his truck. I had to go through selling off all of our equipment. We had warehouses with supplies. I depended upon my husband, and he did everything, and I knew very little. So I'm making this video for you. That I'm even going to quickly go in and tell you about our stepson, my stepson, which was his son. I raised him. I took care of him. He lived with us from the time he was in the 1st grade, and when he died, he was in, I think, the 5th grade. Guess what? Because I wasn't his mother and I hadn't adopted him, he was forced to go back to live with a mother who was an alcoholic and a drug addict and could not provide, didn't even have a home, didn't even have a bed for him to live in, because the court couldn't do anything to help me. Don't let this happen to you. If you have children, please make sure that you are properly doing the things that you need to do to protect your family. I ended up becoming a life insurance agent in 2009 when some of this, my head kind of cleared, because I didn't want any other ladies to go through what I went through. I'm not making this video to sell you anything. I'm making this video because it was devastating, and the things I learned, I do not want you to have to go through. So if you have any questions, I don't want to go and make this video so long. I'll make other videos that will talk to you about this. If you have questions about how to prepare, the things that you need to do, please leave me a message below, because I will do my best to help you, to point you in the right direction so that you can start making preparations so that something doesn't happen like this to you. Because we're not promised tomorrow, my friends. Since then, I have seen so many young fathers pass away and leave their wives with children and not be prepared. Please don't do this to your family. I know that this is not something you do on purpose, but we're not promised to tomorrow. Please make preparations, friends and family. If you have young children who are married with children, please share my video to help them see the urgency. This is very urgent. It is not something that you can wait on. Thank you, friends, for supporting me. Please like and subscribe and share my videos and comment. I'm here to help you. God bless and have a wonderful day, my friends.